morning. I haven't slept. I've been kind of struggling with this idea. I want to make a video on interpretations that you probably are less known, revolving around the Bible, especially the Old Testament. Um, I'm going to have various interpretations, so it's going to be kind of a longer video. And so I thought I would kind of isolate one topic area that's kind of big and just make a quick video before I go to sleep on that in itself. And that's the topic of original sin. Um, Ultimately, in that video that I'm talking about that I will make in the future, um, the basis of it is understanding the history of the canonization of the Bible, um, and that beyond even just the edits and the translations and the deciding what books were going to be in there and who was deciding those things, people like Hasidic rabbis were the first to touch it, and these weren't Hasidic rabbis that were looking to create a Christian church at all. Um, and then after that, you can look at Constantine trying to unite the Roman Empire through Christianity. So these are political attempts to use this story, this biblical context, these texts, to manipulate the masses in a political way. And so I hope to kind of untie that in a way where you can make decisions for yourself, because what happens is we hear these stories in very out of context ways, and whether it's movies like the Ten Commandments or just our Bible study classes, we all have this sort of understanding of these stories, and when you go back and read them, sometimes the universal understanding of these stories seems to be very opposite of what the literal translations are. So again, beginning with original sin, I can find absolutely no biblical reference to this idea that we're born of original sin, and that is what we are trying to overcome through our lifetime. And I challenge anyone to show me where that would be, or, where I'm missing that Old Testament or New Testament, or even extra canonical stuff, which, I'm a very big fan of as well. So let's take this apart a little bit. Like, where is this notion coming from? When people say we are all born into sin or of sin or out of sin, obviously the first notion that comes to mind is, well, we're born from sex. So sex is sin, and we're all born of sex, Well, again, no literal reference in the Old Testament or New Testament to sinful adult sex. And, while I have some moral understandings of what is good for adult sex, this does speak to promiscuity, monogamous sex, and, even different types of adult sex, because no one can point to me anywhere in the Bible, whether it's the Ten Commandments, the extra slave laws that come after the Ten Commandments, or the prescriptions that come from Jesus' teachings or his disciples, where it tells you any prescriptions of the right way to have sex. There's not even a law for marriage. The closest thing you get is this adulterous law in the Ten Commandments, which basically means, keep your hands off my property. And if you really break down that law, it's talking before even getting married, because, in this day and at that day and age, what that Ten Commandments are referencing, with all those, if you don't know about this, there's Ten Commandments and there's 100 slave laws after that are, there's more than just the 10, basically. And they get pretty crazy. You can't touch lepers and things of that nature, even if they're dying in front of you. You can't touch the dead, for example. There's a lot of weird laws in there that I don't want to get into right now, but this notion of adultery that you see in the Ten Commandments is because, as a family, your daughter was the only thing that was going to bring any sort of royalty or funding to your family. It's just the way it was. And if your daughter was de-virginized before she could be sold off to a man, that's it. She was a handmaid for the rest of her life. The best she could be would be a maid. She would never get a dowry. She would never get any penance to the family. This is what they relied upon. This was a lifestyle, whether you like it or not. This is why adultery is specifically spoken about. But everything else is not. This notion of pornography, if you look at this word of pornophilia, and this trying to tie this word with, salacious sex or wicked sex, there's nothing like this talking about this. This word comes from port. It's a word of commerce, because That is where the commerce took place back then. That's where the slave trade took place back then. That is where you would sell your daughter to a husband, is at the port. And there were certain laws at the port. So when you were breaking the laws of the port, that would diminish the quality of your daughter, your slave. You know, this is how it was. These were sins, if you will, at that time. But there's nowhere that's going to tell you in the Bible that missionary is better than doggy style, or is masturbation good or masturbation bad, or even gay sex. You know, you find those prescriptions in the Bible. Whether or not some of those things are better for you as a human, okay? That might be true, that may not be true, but it's not based on anything in the Bible. And even if it were, what choice did you have except to be born of sex? Is there any priest out there that is behind the position that you were somehow impulsing two human beings to commit a sin so that you could come down here and enjoy life? Is that how it works? Is that why you're blamed for original sin? You know, if you're a Manichaean, a Gnostic, a lot of them believe that we come out crying because we're really upset that we're seeing this world again. Oh shit, we're back here again. That's kind of how it works. So we can't be blamed for this. This certainly is not what they mean by this defilement that we are, that we have this original sin that we were trying to overcome. So then you go to Eve, okay? And you think, well, it's because of her. She's our first mom, and she messed it all up for us by eating this apple. She got tricked, and then there's these crazy interpretations. The interpretations go on. The further out you get, I mean, you know where it goes, that this is just a metaphor for having sex with the devil, and so on and so forth. Assume the worst. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Literally, she eats an apple that teaches her the difference between good and evil. Okay? Otherwise, she gets raped by the devil. Right? Am I supposed to read this any other way? Okay? So, we're to believe that the God, that your heavenly Father, does not want you to have discernment between good and evil. That he wants you to be a zombie, a child for the rest of your life, unable to discern between good and evil. To have consciousness. Does this make any sense to you, that you would be blamed for this? To the ability to discern between good and evil. Okay? Blame for the rape of your descendant mother. And none of these are backed up by the biblical text. These are all crazy, manipulative interpretations to make us feel less. To make us feel like we need somebody to absolve us before we get anywhere in our lives. And that is just not true. The Bible. And you will never have the relationship with God that you want to have as long as you live in that state. Because if there's one thing that Jesus is teaching you, it's to never live in fear. Because in fear, you're always in a primal state of survival. You can never reach higher consciousness. You can never reach agape love. Because you're always in that fight or flight situation. Now you tell me, would the father of that being be blaming God? Would he be blaming you for anything? What do you know? You know nothing in this existence. It's hard enough to get through the day, much less make sense of the spiritual realms that are being inflicted upon you. And you're to be blamed for this? If anything, you should be mad. Not mad at our Creator, but mad at the influences that are keeping us from seeing truth and the Creator. And he just take all this away and give us understanding. All I can tell you is I believe that he has as much faith in us as we should have in him. Itself. In the sense that he knows that every single one of us will figure our way out of this confusion. that we will be spiritually, mentally, and physically transcended past this, not through death, but through truth and understanding, through our hearts. You know, very easy interpretation to say that Jesus put the church in each one of our hearts, that God is to be found in the inner chambers of each one of our hearts. Would God put himself in fallible bodies, infallible minds, infallible hearts? We have an endless capacity to love, unlike any being that I've ever seen on this planet. From something, it never ceases. If I want to, I can go spread endless love tomorrow, and it'll never go away. It'll never, the well will never dry up. That comes from something. So, yeah, this idea of original sin, this is a political concept to hold us down from our understandings. There's nothing that can be backed up in the Bible from it. These are some of the elucidations that I want to get into in terms of these interpretations that are just so easily passed on, throughout our Western culture, that are really holding us back as Westerners from being real humans, to be honest with you. I hope this alleviates some understanding of what you're supposed to be thinking about.